He hated his mother, so he decided to take that hatred out on several innocent women. Hello, true crimerers. This is a serial killer case of John Wayne Glover. Yeah, not the other G. And since we're doing a serial killer, must get in character. Viewer discretion is advised. John Glover was born on November 26, 1932. God damn, that's old. Really? Yeah, that's when he was born. And he was born in a place called Wolverhampton in the United Kingdom. And I'm just now realizing the reflection in these is not great, so let's take them off. Great. Now, anytime that I cover a serial killer, or anytime you hear the story of a serial killer, they usually always have the same origin story, if you will. And John Wayne Glover was no exception. From a very early age, his parents divorced, and his mother was apparently a little promiscuous. This would create a very, depraved, just sort of bizarre relationship with his mother. John would actually end up just hating her and resenting her. He couldn't stand the fact that she was in relationship after relationship after relationship, and all these men are being brought to their home. One day, he uncovered some photographs of his mother while he was snooping around, and the photos were pornographic in nature. So this created another, bridge between him and his mom. By his early teenage years, he was already committing petty crimes. He was stealing things, especially like handbags and purses. He would steal clothing, and sometimes he would steal food. This would lead to John not being accepted into the British Army because they found out about his long list of little crimes here and there, and they decided that he just was not going to fit. He dropped out of school as well. By 1956, as an adult, he would actually move away from the United Kingdom, and he would go all the way to Australia. We're going down under for this one, folks. Down under. Down under. No, don't do that again. Okay. He basically just wanted to get as far away from his mother, whose name was Frida, as he possibly could. But eventually, down the road in 1976, Frida would actually move to Australia, so he did not escape her very long. But when he first moved there in 1956, he was jumping around from boarding house to boarding house. He lived in Melbourne for a while. He would then actually become a naturalized citizen of Australia. He also lived in Victoria. He was in New South Wales for a bit. But he couldn't escape his petty crimes from the past, and he wanted to keep it going even as an adult. So he would commit more petty thefts, little robberies here and there. He would also assault a couple of women, one of them being an elderly woman. He would be convicted of crimes like indecent assault, assault leading to bodily harm, and a few counts of larceny just to, When he was convicted, he was given a good behavior bond, something I have never heard of, so he didn't actually serve any time in jail. By 1968, he would marry his wife. Her name was Gay Rolls. The two of them would then move into Gay's parents' house, so his in-laws' house, and that was in Mossman, which is in Sydney, Australia. By 1976, that is when his mother moved to Australia, again, not being able to escape her. And also at this time, he had a lot of resentment for his elderly mother-in-law. Her name was Essie. He just had these, pent-up aggression towards elderly women. That's because he grew up despising his own mother. So in 1989, his mother Frida would pass away from breast cancer. At that point, he and his wife would divorce, and she would take the kids that they had and move away. And they actually moved away to New Zealand. In the early to mid 80s, while his mom was still alive, he would start to volunteer at senior citizen homes. He would end up working for a company called 4 in 20, which I guess sells meat pies. He would go around these like senior citizen homes and he would drive this little vehicle that looked like a meat pie. So that's silly. He would become known to the elderly folk as the Pie Man. During all of this, while he was doing this, he always seemed friendly. He was engaging. He was always smiling. Friends would describe him as being just super happy and trustworthy, and everything seemed to be going great for John. After his mother passed away in 1989, he would start a new journey into his life. And that journey would be to end the lives of others. Later on, psychologists who would work with him would say that he was so angry and so just pissed off at his own mother, and he never got to take out his aggression on her. And this is why he would do what he would go on to do. On March 1st, 1989, 82-year-old Gwendolyn Mitchell-Hill was just walking down the road on her way home. And this was in Mosman or Mosman. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it. He saw her walking down the road, and then he went back to his car, retrieved a hammer, and then began to follow her. He then noticed that she went into an apartment building, probably where she lived, and when they entered the foyer, he got up right behind her as she was going into her apartment. He took the hammer and he smashed it over her head. And then when she fell to the ground, he just continued to hit her over the head. He also struck her in other parts, which actually broke some of her ribs. He then snatched her purse, which had roughly $100 in it, and then fled the scene. Her body was found literally minutes later by 2 children, which that's a nightmare in itself. The neighbors somehow, when they found her, assumed that she had just fallen over and hit her head, which was causing all the blood, which to me is weird. As the police were being called and the ambulance was on the way, they were like cleaning up this mess on the ground, so there was no evidence that police were able to retrieve. There were no witnesses, so this is just a random attack, it appears. On May 9th, 1989, also in the same city, 84-year-old Lady Winfreda Isabel Ashton, sorry I had to read that, she was also walking down the street, just going to her home. John Glover noticed her, and he just slapped on a pair of gloves, grabbed his trusty hammer, followed her into the foyer of her apartment, and then struck her over the head with the hammer. He would then take her and drag her to like a little area where the trash cans were, like those big trash cans. He noticed that the hammer strikes didn't actually kill her, so he took her and he smashed her head into the concrete. He then removed her pantyhose and wrapped it around her neck and strangled her until he knew she was dead. He then stole her purse, which contains somewhere a little over $100, and again, he fled the scene. At this point, it's important to note that the first 2 victims, there was no signs of sexual assault, there was no bodily fluids found in the victims, so this appeared to be, at first, just robberies that would lead to murder. Through June 1989 to October 1989, John would not commit any murders, but he would go into these like senior citizen homes, again, as the Pie Man, and he would sexually assault older women in kind of strange ways. Like he would just sort of put his hand up like their nightgown and start touching their, body parts. He would like fondle them. Now, some of these women were blind, some of them were deaf, some of them had dementia, so really none of them got a great look at who was doing this. Eventually, there was a composite drawing kind of made up to sort of sum up what this man may have looked like. Now, one of the women said that this was a teenage boy who did this, but she was one who was suffering really badly from dementia. So in October of 1989, he came across 86-year-old Doris Cox. He then followed her into like a little alcove where he smashed her head into the brick wall. But she would actually end up surviving. She unfortunately did not even get a look at the man who did this, but it is believed at that point by police that this was likely the same person who was committing these murders of elderly women. Sorry about the dogs in the background. They're part of the stories I tell. November 2nd, 1989, Margaret Pahud. She was an 85-year-old woman who, again, was walking on her way to her house. She had just finished her shopping. She had a bag or two in her hands. She too would be accosted and struck over the head with a blunt force object that police would later identify as the hammer. Her purse was also stolen, and then she was found by a couple of school children. Again, that's just more trauma to add to the story. At this point, police had nicknamed this person the Granny Killer. Now, she had more than $100. She had $300 or $400 in her purse, so he got away with a little bit more this time. Less than a day later, on November 3rd, 1989, 81-year-old Olive Cleveland was sitting on a bench, just relaxing and taking in the quiet day. John would approach her and just sit next to her and try to have a conversation with her. But then she got a little uncomfortable, so she got up and began to walk away. He then put on his gloves. He already had his hammer on his person. He then forced her into a secluded area near the building where they were at. And you know the drill at this point. He would strike her over the head with the hammer a couple of times. And then when she was unconscious, he took off her pantyhose, tied it around her neck, and strangled her. Again, no sign of sexual assault. There was no bodily fluids found in her either. At this point, police are offering $200,000 for any information about who was doing this. November 23rd, 1989. 93-year-old Muriel Falconer, she was walking past the Buena Vista Hotel. John saw her, went to his car, put on his gloves, got his hammer, followed closely behind her, and then struck her over the head. She was actually screaming for help, and this is one of the victims, one of the first victims in this story that actually could be heard screaming for help. He removed her pantyhose, strangled her with it, and stole about $100 from her purse. This time, there was a witness, and they kind of agreed with the composite drawing that was made for those other attacks. You know, the creepy ones from the senior citizen homes with the fondling. So again, police said this is the work of the Granny Killer, and now we're bumping the reward up to $250,000. Now at this point, police are finally on to John because they realize that by doing some legwork, of course, that it may be the Pie Man who was committing those fondling attacks, and the fact that he kind of resembled the composite drawing of the most recent murder victim, well, they just wanted to talk to him. They just wanted to ask him some questions. John kind of basically refused. On March 19th, 1990, at this point, John is actually in a relationship with a woman, a 60-year-old woman named Joan Sinclair. She had recently divorced her husband. At this point, police are actually surveilling John Glover just to see if anything suspicious comes up. On March 19th, 1990, while police are actually watching, his movements, they noticed that he was in Joan Sinclair's place, but he never really seemed to leave the building. So police, feeling concerned, went to go knock on her door. Nobody answered. And so eventually they were able to get inside, where they found her body, again, bludgeoned with a hammer. Also had the pantyhose tied around her neck. Where was John? Well, he was just down the hallway taking a bath. Well, he was in the bath and he had tried to end his own life. They found this scribbled out suicide note next to the bathtub. He apparently swallowed a whole bunch of Valium and then tried to slit his wrist, but all of this was unsuccessful. After his hospital stay, he would be arrested and he would be charged with the murders of these 6 elderly women. Eventually, when they presented enough evidence to John, that is when he basically said, okay, you got me. And that's how we know the details of the 6 different murders, because he would basically just lay it all out for them. Like I said earlier, he would be seen by several psychologists, first of all, to determine if he could go to trial. They would determine that he was sane during all of the murders. He knew what he was doing, and he committed these murders on purpose. And they would come to the conclusion that this was not about sexual assault, because none of them were sexually assaulted. This really wasn't even about the money, because he stole so little, like amount. And some of them even had expensive rings still left on their finger. So they essentially decided this was because of his hatred for his mother. This was because of his hatred for his previous mother-in-law, Essie. He was so mad that he never got to take out any of his anger on his mother that he took it all out on these innocent 6 women. He was 58 years old when he started committing these murders, and that's usually very, very old to start something like this. Police believe that there are probably other victims, but he has not confessed to any other ones other than the 6. Behind me this whole video, you've seen pictures of some of the victims I've talked about, and some of these are women that they may be able to possibly link to him. But they don't have any forensic evidence to do this, and now they don't have John. John would go on trial in 1990, and then he would be convicted of all counts of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison, where he was to never be released. But in 2005, he was found in his jail cell. At the age of 72, he managed to tie up a noose and he hanged himself. So now they'll never know for sure, at least by his word, that he was responsible for other murders. But at least the monster was caught and he could not hurt anyone else. That is it for today's video. I do want to thank you guys for watching. I am still getting used to this format, so bear with me as I'm working through this, but hopefully these have been pretty good so far. In the description below, you guys, if you have cases you want to recommend, you can send me an email. I will put the email below in the description. If you go to my link tree, which I will also have down below, you can see my case list with all the names I have on there. I have like 4,100 names on my list to cover, so I'll be doing this for a while. Please read through the list, and if you don't see the name you want me to cover, just send me a quick email with the name, location, when it happened, and that's all I'll really need. In the link tree, you can also find my merch if you want to. We sell t-shirts, we sell hoodies, we sell beanies, we sell mugs. We now sell little wine glasses here. So the wine glasses say "Making a True Whinerer." We also sell this shirt. It says "The Owl Did It." If you know the true crime case, The Staircase, with Michael Peterson and his wife being found at the bottom of a staircase, they tried to accuse, at one point, an owl of doing it. So we always make a joke, "The owl did it." So yeah, whatever. All right, thank you guys for watching this video, and we will see you for the next one. And until then, ta-ta for now, true crime-aroonies.